Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. I remember it like it was yesterday, the day Mark walked into my life. It was a regular Tuesday morning at the office, the kind where the coffee is a bit too weak and the fluorescent lights buzz more annoyingly than usual. I was buried in a pile of design drafts when I heard the murmur of introductions from the team next door. Then, he walked into my field of vision. Mark, with his slightly tousled brown hair and a confident stride that seemed out of place in our mundane office setting. He was the new guy, joining as a recruiter for a different team, but we shared the common space. I tried not to pay too much attention, but there was something about him that was undeniably intriguing. Maybe it was his slightly crooked smile or the way his eyes seemed to sparkle with a mixture of intelligence and mischief. Our first interaction was almost accidental. I was at the photocopier, struggling with a paper jam. Out of nowhere, he appeared beside me, a playful smile dancing on his lips. "Need a hand with that?" he asked, his voice smooth and friendly. "I think I've got it, but thanks," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. Secretly, I was relieved for the help. "Mark," he introduced himself, extending a hand after we fixed the machine together. "I'm Linda," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, yet there was a gentleness to it. We started running into each other more often after that. Coffee breaks seemed to align, and lunches became shared. Our conversations were easy, filled with laughter and an array of topics from silly office politics to our shared love for indie music. "Have you heard the new album from the Midnight Echo?" he asked one lunchtime, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "No, but I've been meaning to." "Is it good?" I replied, genuinely interested. "It's amazing. You should give it a listen. Maybe we could even go to their concert next month," he suggested casually, but I could sense the underlying question. "I'd love that," I said, feeling a rush of excitement at the thought. As weeks turned into months, our connection deepened. We'd find reasons to stay late at the office, just to enjoy each other's company in the quiet of the empty building. Those evenings were magical, filled with shared secrets and dreams. "I've always wanted to start my own design firm," I confided in him one evening, staring out at the city lights from our office window. "With your talent, I have no doubt you'll make it," he encouraged, his belief in me making my heart flutter. It wasn't just the conversations that drew me to him. It was the little things he did, like leaving my favorite snacks on my desk or sending me links to articles he knew I'd find interesting. Our relationship was a slow burn, a gradual buildup of moments and emotions that felt natural and right. It was during one of our dinner dates, at a cozy Italian restaurant downtown, that things took a more serious turn. "You know, Linda," he said, his eyes earnest and searching, "I've never felt this way about anyone before." I remember my heart skipping a beat, my palms getting sweaty. "Me neither, Mark. It's like you've become a part of my life that I didn't know was missing." That night, under the soft glow of the streetlights, he took my hand in his, and we decided to take the leap. We were no longer just colleagues or friends. We were something more, something beautiful. And so, our journey began. A journey filled with hope, laughter, and an unspoken promise of a future together. We were blissfully unaware of the challenges that lay ahead, basking in the warmth of our newfound love. The shift was subtle at first, like the slow changing of seasons. It began with my promotion, a moment I had eagerly anticipated, but it brought with it an unexpected twist, a transfer to a different department in a new city. The news was a cocktail of excitement and apprehension. "Can you believe it, Mark? They're moving me to the creative head position," but in the New York office, I gushed over dinner, the candlelight flickering in his eyes. "That's fantastic, Linda. But New York, that's a big change," Mark responded, his voice trailing off, a hint of concern in his eyes. "We'll make it work, won't we?" I asked, reaching across the table for his hand. His fingers felt cold as he squeezed mine gently. "Of course, we will," he said, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The days leading up to my departure were a whirlwind of packing and planning. Mark helped, but the usual banter and laughter were replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to hang over us like a cloud. On my last day at the old office, as I cleared my desk, Mark came up behind me. "Hey, I got you something," he said, handing me a small, beautifully wrapped box. I opened it to find a delicate silver necklace with a tiny pendant. "It's beautiful, Mark. Thank you." "Wear it and think of me," he said, trying to smile. I threw my arms around him, the fear of what lay ahead suddenly overwhelming. "I'm going to miss you so much." "I'll miss you too, but we'll see each other on weekends. It'll be an adventure," He reassured me, but his voice lacked conviction. The first few weeks in New York were a blur of activity. The new role was demanding, and the city itself was a relentless wave of sights, sounds, and people. Mark and I tried to keep up our routines, calling each other every night, video chats, texting throughout the day, but it wasn't the same. "Hey, how was your day?" I asked during one of our nightly calls, trying to sound cheerful. "Busy, as usual. And yours?" His voice was flat, distant. "Same here. I'm still getting used to everything. This city is crazy," I laughed, but my heart wasn't in it. The distance was more than just physical. It was as if we were slowly drifting apart, caught up in our separate worlds. Mark's voice, once so familiar and warm, now felt like it was coming from far away. Then there was Alex Smith, a senior member of Mark's team. I had met Alex a few times before, and he seemed nice enough. But Mark didn't like him, and I never understood why. One evening, while Mark and I were on a call, Alex's name came up. "I had to work on a project with Alex today. He's not that bad, I mentioned casually. "Alex? I don't trust him, Linda. Just be careful around him," Mark said sharply. "Come on, Mark. He's just a coworker." "Nothing more," I replied, a bit taken aback by his tone. "It's not just that. There's something about him. I just don't want you to get too close to him," he insisted, his voice tense. "I know how to handle myself, Mark. You don't need to worry," I said, trying to reassure him. But Mark's distrust of Alex grew into a point of contention between us. His calls became more infrequent, and when we did talk, there was an underlying tension that neither of us seemed able to shake. One weekend, when Mark visited, the distance between us was palpable. We walked through Central Park, a place I had come to love, but even the beauty of the autumn leaves couldn't mask the growing gap between us. "Is everything okay, Mark? You seem distant," I asked as we sat on a bench, watching the world go by. "It's just work. And this," he gestured between us being in different cities. "It's harder than I thought." "I know, but we're strong. We can get through this," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I hope so, Linda." "I really do," he replied, taking my hand. But his grip felt weak, uncertain. The weeks turned into months, and the chasm only widened. My calls to Mark became a routine, lacking the warmth and excitement they once held. The conversations were mostly about mundane things, the weather, work, the little things that filled our days but didn't bridge the growing divide. It was during one of these calls that I felt the first real pang of fear, a sense that what we had was slipping away, like sand through my fingers. "Linda, I trust you, but just be careful, okay?" "With Alex and everything," Mark said one night, his voice strained. "Mark, there's nothing to worry about," I replied, but even as I said it, I wondered if that was entirely true. The shift in dynamics was subtle yet undeniable. We were no longer the inseparable pair we once were, but two people trying to hold onto something that was slowly, inexorably changing. The future, once so bright and certain, now seemed shrouded in doubt and uncertainty. The air in New York had started to turn crisp with the onset of fall when the seed of jealousy took root in our relationship. It was an ordinary Thursday when it all began, a day marked by the endless tapping of keyboards and the muted buzz of office chatter. I was at my desk, deeply engrossed in a design layout, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Hey, how's your day going? Had lunch with Alex again?" His message read, the words seemingly casual but laced with an undercurrent of suspicion. I replied quickly, trying to dispel his worries. "Just grabbed a quick sandwich at my desk. Super busy day." But the truth was, I had indeed had lunch with Alex. He had become a sort of office buddy, always there with a joke to lighten the mood or an interesting story to share. I didn't see the harm in it, but I knew Mark would disapprove. So, I chose to omit that detail, not realizing that this small act of omission would be the start of a growing rift. That evening, as I walked through the bustling streets of the city, heading to my apartment, my phone rang. It was Mark. "Hey, you," I answered, trying to sound cheerful. "Hey, listen, I just saw Alex's comment on your Facebook post. Do you guys talk a lot?" Mark's voice was tense, his words careful but loaded. "Oh, that. It's nothing, just office banter. You know how it is," I replied, attempting to keep my voice light. "I don't know, Linda. It just feels like he's always around you. And now with you guys being in the same city and me here, it just bothers me," he confessed, the strain evident in his voice. "Mark, there's nothing to worry about. I love you, and that's all that matters," I reassured him, feeling a twinge of guilt for not being completely honest. but reassurances did little to quell the growing storm. Each mention of Alex, each tagged photo or casual comment, seemed to fan the flames of doubt in Mark's mind. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and plans for the future, were now punctuated by awkward silences and veiled accusations. One weekend, Mark visited, and the tension was palpable. We decided to go out for dinner, hoping a change of scenery might lighten the mood. The restaurant was cozy, with dim lighting and soft music playing in the background. But even the romantic setting couldn't bridge the gap that had formed between us. "So, how's work? Seeing much of Alex these days?" Mark asked, his attempt at casual conversation feeling forced. "Work's good. And yeah, I see Alex around, but it's strictly professional, Mark," I said, my voice firm, hoping to put an end to his doubts. "I just don't get a good vibe from him, Linda. And the way he acts around you. It's not right," Mark persisted, his eyes searching mine for some kind of confirmation. "Mark, you're overthinking this. He's just a friendly guy. That's all there is to it," I tried to explain, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The evening ended with a strained goodbye, and as I watched Mark's retreating figure, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The once solid foundation of our relationship was now riddled with cracks of mistrust and unspoken fears. The following weeks were a blur of busy workdays and lonely nights. Mark's calls became less frequent, and when we did talk, the conversations were brief and stilted. The trust and ease we once shared were being eroded by a constant undercurrent of jealousy and doubt. It reached a boiling point one evening when Mark called after seeing another comment from Alex on my social media. "Linda, I can't ignore this anymore. It's like he's everywhere in your life now. What's going on?" Mark's voice was a mix of frustration and desperation. "Mark, please believe me. There's nothing between Alex and me. I don't know how else to say it," I pleaded, my own frustration rising. "But how can I be sure? Linda, how can I trust this when I'm miles away and he's right there?" His voice cracked, revealing the depth of his turmoil. "I don't know, Mark. I just don't know," I admitted, feeling helpless and cornered. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized how deeply these seeds of jealousy and doubt had taken root in our relationship. The man I loved, the man I had planned a future with, was now a stranger consumed by insecurity and fear. And I, on my part, felt lost in a maze of misunderstandings and half-truths, unsure of how to find my way back to him. The distance between us, once just a matter of geography, had morphed into something much more profound. It was a chasm filled with unsaid words, unaddressed fears, and a slowly fading love. As the city outside my window buzzed with life, I lay there, engulfed in a silence that spoke volumes about the uncertain future of our once beautiful relationship. The crisp autumn air had turned bitterly cold, mirroring the growing frostiness in our conversations. The days were shorter, and so were Mark's texts and calls. Each time the phone rang, my heart would skip a beat, hoping for a change, for a return to our old warmth. But hope was fading fast, like the last leaves of fall. I remember one particular evening, huddled in my apartment, watching the rain patter against the window. My phone buzzed, a message from Mark. "Can we talk?" it read, simple and ominous. I called him, my hand trembling slightly. "Hey, what's up?" I tried to sound normal, but my voice betrayed my anxiety. "Linda, I saw the photos. You and Alex at that team building event. You looked a bit too cozy." Mark's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach churn. "It was a team event, Mark. You know how these things are," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "No, I don't think I do. Because in my team events, I don't get cozy with other women," he shot back, his words sharp and accusing. "We were just having fun, Mark." "It's nothing like what you're thinking," I said, my frustration growing. The conversation escalated quickly. Each word was a blow, widening the crack between us. The trust we had built over years seemed to crumble in a matter of minutes. "Mark, you have to trust me. I love you, and there's nothing going on with Alex," I pleaded, my voice laced with desperation. "I want to trust you, Linda. But every time I try to, I see something else. Another photo, another comment. How can I trust you when every instinct tells me not to?" His voice broke, and in that moment, I heard the pain and uncertainty that he had been carrying. The call ended on a somber note, leaving a heavy silence in my apartment. The sound of the rain seemed louder now, each drop echoing my turbulent thoughts. A few days later, I received a surprise visit from Mark. He had come without warning, his expression grim. My heart raced as I opened the door. "Mark, what are you doing here?" I asked, taken aback. "We need to talk, Linda." "Face to face," he said, stepping into the apartment. We sat on the couch, a familiar space that now felt strangely alien. The tension was tangible, a thick fog that filled the room. "Mark, whatever it is, we can work it out," I started, but he held up his hand to stop me. "I need to know. Linda, just tell me the truth. Is there something going on between you and Alex?" His eyes searched mine, looking for an answer he dreaded. "No, Mark. There's nothing. I've told you a million times," I replied, my voice a mix of anger and sadness. "But I can't shake this feeling, Linda. It's eating me up inside. Every time my phone buzzes, I'm scared it's going to be someone telling me that my girlfriend is with another man," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your fear is baseless, Mark. You're letting your jealousy ruin us," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "Maybe it's not just jealousy. Maybe it's intuition. Maybe it's me seeing things for what they really are," he countered, his tone hardening. We went back and forth, our words a volley of hurt and misunderstanding. The conversation turned in circles, going nowhere but down. In the end, Mark stood up, his face a mask of pain and confusion. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Linda," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mark, please, don't say that. We can figure this out," I said, reaching out to him, but he stepped back. "I need some time, Linda. Time to think, to clear my head," he said, turning towards the door. I watched him leave, the door closing softly behind him. The apartment felt colder now, emptier. I sank to the floor, my mind racing, my heart breaking. The confrontation had left more questions than answers. The doubt and jealousy that had crept into our relationship had now burst into the open, leaving us both raw and exposed. I lay there, lost in a whirlwind of emotions, wondering how we had gotten to this point and if there was any way back from the precipice we now found ourselves on. The weeks following our confrontation were a mix of silence and stilted conversations. Each call with Mark felt like walking on eggshells, a careful dance around the issues that lay like landmines between us. And then, the business trip happened. I was selected to represent our department at a major conference in Los Angeles. It was a big deal, a career-defining moment. But there was a catch: Alex was also attending. I knew this would be a problem with Mark, so I hesitated to tell him. I finally mustered up the courage to break the news during one of our nightly calls. "Mark, I've been selected to go to LA for the conference next week," I said, trying to sound casual. "That's great, Linda. Congratulations," he replied, but his voice lacked enthusiasm. "There's something else. Alex is also attending. It's a team thing," I added quickly, bracing myself for his reaction. There was a pause, a heavy silence that seemed to stretch on forever. "I see. And you didn't think this would be an issue?" Mark's voice was calm, but I could sense the underlying tension. "It's just a business trip, Mark. Nothing more," I said, my voice steady. "We'll see about that," he replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. The trip itself was a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and networking events. Alex was there, but our interactions were strictly professional. Despite the busy schedule, my thoughts often drifted to Mark and the growing chasm between us. One evening, after a long day of sessions, I posted a photo of the team at dinner on social media. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed. It was Mark. "Looks like you're having fun," he texted, his words laced with sarcasm. "It's just a work dinner, Mark. Nothing to worry about," I replied, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The trip ended, and I returned to New York, exhausted but relieved. I hoped that my return would mark a new beginning for Mark and me, a chance to mend things. But things took a different turn. I noticed a change in Mark's behavior after the trip. His calls became even more infrequent, and when we did talk, his tone was cold, distant. "What's going on, Mark? You've been different since I got back," I said during one of our calls, concern lacing my voice. "I've been thinking, Linda, about us, about everything," he replied, his voice heavy. "And what have you decided?" I asked, my heart racing. "I don't know. I need some more time," he said, and I could hear the strain in his voice. The following weeks were a blur of confusion and loneliness. I tried to reach out to Mark, to bridge the gap that had formed between us, but it felt like reaching across an abyss. One evening, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I called Mark, my hands trembling. "Mark, we need to talk. This can't go on like this," I said, determination in my voice. "You're right. We do need to talk. But not over the phone. I'll come to New York this weekend," he replied, and I could sense the seriousness in his tone. The weekend arrived, and with it, a storm of emotions. I waited for Mark at my apartment, my mind racing with possible scenarios of how our conversation might unfold. When he arrived, the air was thick with unspoken words. We sat facing each other, the familiar distance between us now feeling like an insurmountable barrier. Mark, whatever it is, we can work through it. We've always found a way, I began, my voice trembling slightly. Linda, I don't know if I can do this anymore. The distance, the doubts, the constant worry. It's too much, he said, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and resignation. Mark, please, don't give up on us. I know we've had our issues, but we can fix them. We can, I pleaded, my heart aching. I want to believe that, Linda. But every time I try, something else comes up. I can't shake the feeling that there's something going on between you and Alex. And if not him, then maybe someone else. I just don't know anymore, he said, his voice breaking. Mark, there's no one else. There's never been anyone else. It's always been you, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. I want to believe that, Linda. I really do. But I can't. Not now. Not like this, he replied, his voice a whisper. We talked for hours, going in circles, each trying to find a foothold in the slippery slope of our relationship. But the more we talked, the more apparent it became that the foundation we had built was now cracked and unstable. In the end, Mark stood up, his face etched with sorrow. I need to go, Linda. I need some time to think, to figure out what I want. Mark, don't do this. Please, I said, reaching out to him, but he gently pushed my hand away. I'm sorry, Linda. I just need some space. Some time to clear my head, he said, turning towards the door. I watched him leave, each step he took away from me feeling like a piece of my heart being torn away. The door closed softly behind him, leaving me alone in the silence of my apartment, the echoes of our conversation haunting the empty space. The weeks following Mark's departure were a blur of confusion and heartache. The apartment felt too big, too quiet, a stark reminder of the gaping void left by his absence. Each day was a struggle, a battle between hope and despair. I tried to bury myself in work, to lose myself in the never-ending flow of tasks and deadlines. But every email notification, every phone call, sent a jolt of anticipation through me, followed by a crushing wave of disappointment when it wasn't Mark. One rainy Tuesday, as I sat at my desk, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you. The message was brief, but the weight of the words was heavy. I agreed, and we decided to meet at a small cafe near Central Park, a neutral ground far from the memories of our shared past. As I walked to the cafe, my mind raced with possibilities. What did Mark want to tell me? Was it a reconciliation or the final closure? The uncertainty was agonizing. I arrived first and found a quiet corner table. The cafe was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. When Mark arrived, he looked different. There was a heaviness in his steps, a somberness in his eyes. We ordered coffee, and after a few moments of awkward silence, Mark spoke. Linda, I've done a lot of thinking, and I've come to a decision. My heart sank. His tone was final, decisive. What decision, Mark? I can't do this anymore. Linda. The distance, the doubts, it's too much. I'm sorry, but I think it's best if we go our separate ways, he said, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had known this might be coming, but the reality of it was still a shock. Mark, are you sure? Is there no way we can work through this? He shook his head. I've tried, Linda, but the trust is gone. And without trust, what do we have? I wanted to argue, to fight for us. But deep down, I knew he was right. The foundation of our relationship had crumbled, and there was no easy way to rebuild it. Okay, Mark, if that's what you want, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We talked for a while longer, reminiscing about the good times, acknowledging the challenges we had faced. It was a bittersweet conversation, a farewell to what we had once shared. As we stood to leave, Mark reached out and took my hand. I'm sorry, Linda, for everything. I hope you find happiness. I squeezed his hand, fighting back tears. I hope you find happiness too, Mark. Take care of yourself. We walked out of the cafe together, but as we reached the street, we went our separate ways. I watched him walk away, a part of me still longing to call out to him, to run back to the safety of our past. But I knew it was time to let go, to move forward. The days that followed were a mix of grief and relief. The finality of our breakup was painful, but it also brought a sense of closure, a chance to heal and rebuild. I leaned on my friends and family for support, pouring out my heartaches and fears. They listened, offered comfort and advice, and slowly, the sharp edges of my pain began to soften. I immersed myself in new projects at work, took up a painting class, and started exploring the city on my own. Each day brought small victories, tiny steps towards healing and self-discovery. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized that I was okay. The heartache was still there, a dull ache in the background, but it no longer consumed me. I had faced my fears, weathered the storm, and come out stronger on the other side. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was also full of possibilities. And so, I moved on, carrying the lessons and memories of my time with Mark, but also embracing the promise of new beginnings. The road ahead was uncharted, but I was ready to see where it would lead.